My fiancé cheated on me with my own mother just days before our wedding. But what I did next left everyone speechless. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 28 years old. Right now, I'm standing at the altar of St. Mary's Cathedral, dressed in the most stunning gown I've ever worn, surrounded by 200 guests who have no clue what's about to unfold. The white silk feels heavy against my skin, and the sunlight through the cathedral's stained glass windows casts colored patterns on the marble floor. I'm holding a bouquet of white roses, trembling, not from excitement, but from the weight of what I learned 24 hours ago. My father stands beside me, arm linked with mine, his face stern yet comforting. He knows the truth. He's the only one who does. In the front row sits my mother, composed and graceful in her navy blue dress, dabbing at her eyes as now it makes my stomach turn. The organ fills the air as guests whisper, admiring the decorations my mother insisted on choosing. White lilies everywhere, just like she wanted. The same flowers she wrote about in her diary when describing her affair with him. I graduated summa cum laude in English literature from Columbia University, and now work as a senior editor at Morrison & Associates Publishing, one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. I've built a life I was proud of, a career that mattered, relationships I thought I could trust. My father, Pastor Williams, is well respected in our community for his integrity and faith. He raised me to value honesty above all. My fiancé, on the other hand, comes from the influential Blackwell family. Old money, strong connections, and an image of perfection. 3 years ago, he proposed at Lincoln Center during the intermission of Swan Lake. Under the spotlight, he knelt with a 3-carat diamond ring. And the audience turned to watch as I said yes, tears in my eyes. It felt like a dream, everything I'd ever wanted. The wedding planning began immediately. My mother threw herself into every detail. The venue, the flowers, the menu, even my dress. Whenever I offered my input, she'd look almost desperate and insist, "Sweetheart, trust me, I know what's best." I thought she was just an over-involved mother who wanted everything perfect. I didn't realize she was planning the wedding where she'd watch the man she was secretly with marry her daughter. The pianist begins the processional. I take my first step down the aisle. Each footstep echoes through the grand cathedral, and I feel every pair of eyes fixed on me. Some smile, others wipe away tears, believing they're witnessing a fairy tale. But they're about to see something entirely different. Hidden between the roses in my bouquet are a few pages from my mother's diary, the ones I found yesterday, filled with confessions of her affair with my fiancé. Every lie, every meeting, every plan to continue after our wedding. As I walk toward the altar, I'm no longer the woman who believed in flawless love stories. I'm someone who has learned that even the people you trust most can betray you in the deepest way. And sometimes, the only way to reclaim your strength is to refuse to be their victim. Each step brings me closer to the moment I'll show everyone who I really am. 3 months ago, I thought my life was perfect. I woke up in my cozy Upper West Side apartment, walked to my publishing job, and came home to plan the wedding of my dreams with the man I believed was my soulmate. My days were steady and fulfilling. Coffee at 7, a quick read through industry updates. Then the subway to my office, where I spent hours editing novels about love and family. Ironically, I was skilled at catching inconsistencies in fiction, yet blind to the ones in my own life. My fiancé worked at Sterling Martinez and Associates, one of Manhattan's top law firms, earning a six-figure salary that made our lavish wedding possible. We'd been together for 3 years, living separately, but sharing most nights together, dreaming of buying a home in Connecticut after the wedding. The night he proposed was unforgettable. During the second intermission of Swan Lake, he disappeared for champagne, then reappeared under the spotlight on one knee, holding a ring that sparkled like a star. The entire audience applauded as I said yes. Even now, despite everything, I still remember how magical it felt. My mother cried harder than I did that night. She hugged him so tightly that I had to laugh and tease her for acting like she was the one getting engaged. She insisted we celebrate at her favorite downtown restaurant, the one with soft lighting and a wine list she knew by heart. She ordered an expensive bottle, saying, "Nothing's too good for my future son-in-law." From then on, the wedding became her obsession. Every weekend was filled with appointments, fittings, and tastings. She ran the planning like a corporate project, with color-coded spreadsheets and endless calls. She had opinions on everything: my dress, the decor, even the roses in my bouquet. When I suggested holding the ceremony at my father's church instead of the cathedral, she panicked. "Sweetheart, the cathedral has better acoustics for the music, and the photos will be breathtaking. This is your one special day." I agreed just to keep the peace. Meanwhile, my fiancé seemed oddly detached. Whenever I asked his opinion, he'd say, "Whatever makes you and your mother happy." I thought he was just being thoughtful. Now I see he was letting my mother plan their perfect. Work became my escape. At Morrison and Associates, I was valued for my instincts and trusted with high-profile authors. It was the one part of my life that felt entirely mine. But even there, the wedding followed me, my mother calling daily with urgent questions about flowers or catering. She somehow knew every detail of my fiancé's preferences, his favorite wine, his relatives' dietary needs, even his cousin's number. I never questioned how she knew these things. The first red flag came one Thursday evening, about 2 months before the wedding. I stopped by her house to drop off the guest list and saw my fiancé's car in her driveway. Inside, they were standing unusually close, laughing with glasses of wine in hand. My mother's cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkling like I hadn't seen in years. "Oh, sweetheart," she said quickly, "we were just discussing the seating chart. Your fiancé had great ideas." He smiled, kissed my cheek, and added, "Your mother's incredible. You're lucky to have someone so invested in making your day perfect." They exchanged a glance before my mother offered me wine. "Your fiancé picked it out from that vineyard upstate. You'll love it." It was from a vineyard I'd mentioned months ago on a trip with him, but I'd never told my mother. When I asked how she knew, he said, "You mentioned it last month when we talked about honeymoon spots." I didn't recall that, but brushed it off as wedding stress. That was my mistake, choosing to trust instead of question. Soon, more strange things happened. I'd call her and hear laughter in the background. She'd claim it was my father watching TV, though he was always at the church at that hour. One Saturday, I dropped by her house unannounced. She opened the door in a silk robe, her hair messy, lipstick smudged. "Rebecca, I wasn't expecting you," she said nervously. "The dishes, you told me to come by," I reminded. "Oh, right," she replied quickly. I must have dozed off. Wedding planning is exhausting. But 2 used wine glasses sat on the coffee table, one with her lipstick mark, one without. I smelled expensive cologne, not my father's. "Were you expecting someone?" I asked casually. "No, sweetheart, just me," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she cleared the table. I helped her gather the dishes, but deep down, something felt wrong. 2 weeks later, I had lunch with my fiancé. His phone buzzed and he smiled, not his usual polite smile, but one filled with affection. "Work?" I asked. "Just your mother, confirming the photographer appointment," he said, placing his phone face down. But I'd already spoken to the photographer that morning. The appointment had been moved to next week. When I mentioned it, he looked momentarily puzzled before composing himself. "Oh, she must be talking about the backup photographer. You know how detailed she is with contingency plans." But we had never discussed a backup photographer. 3 weeks before the wedding, I decided to surprise my mother with lunch. She had been working tirelessly on the wedding arrangements, and I wanted to thank her by bringing her favorite Greek takeout. Using my key, I let myself in, calling out, "Mom, I brought you lunch!" No response. As I walked through the foyer toward the kitchen, something felt different. The air carried the scent of an unfamiliar, expensive cologne, and a men's suit jacket hung over the dining chair. It wasn't my father's style. It was charcoal gray, finely tailored, the kind my fiancé wore for business meetings. I found my mother in the kitchen, hurriedly cleaning. Her hair was messy, her blouse wrinkled, and she looked startled. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" she asked, sounding uneasy. "I brought lunch," I said slowly, scanning the room. 2 warm coffee cups sat in the sink, 2 plates with crumbs from what looked like a shared meal, and an open wine bottle with 2 glasses beside it. "I thought you might be hungry," I continued, placing the takeout bag on the counter. "Were you expecting someone?" "No, sweetheart, just me," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "I was just cleaning up after breakfast. You know I hate leaving dishes out." But the dining table was set for 2, with her best china, the set she reserved for special occasions. A fresh red rose rested on one of the placemats. The morning newspaper lay open to the art section, something my mother never read, though my fiancé often did. "Mom, whose jacket is that in the dining room?" I asked. She followed my gaze and paled. "Oh, that's your father's. He must have left it before church." But my father had been at a wedding rehearsal across town that morning. I knew because I'd helped him prepare the notes the night before. Besides, the jacket was far too stylish for my father's conservative taste. "I should get going," my mother said quickly, reaching for the jacket. "I have a florist appointment in an hour and traffic downtown is awful." She was lying. The appointment was scheduled for the next day. I had written it in my planner. I stayed about 20 minutes, watching her fidget nervously, glancing at the clock, jumping at every passing car. When I finally left, she locked the door immediately, something she never did during the day. That evening, I mentioned the jacket to my father over dinner. "Jacket?" he asked, puzzled. "What jacket?" "The charcoal gray one in the dining room this afternoon. Mom said it was yours." My parents exchanged an unreadable look. My mother stood abruptly, clearing dishes still half full of food. "Oh, that jacket," my father said slowly. "I borrowed it from someone at the church for next week's photos. Wanted to look more modern." But my father had never cared about being modern, and the jacket clearly wasn't his size. Over the next few days, I began noticing details I had once ignored. The way my mother's face brightened when my fiancé called, how she seemed to know his schedule better than I did. The change in her perfume, richer, more seductive than her usual floral scent. When I told my fiancé my mother seemed stressed about wedding plans, he offered, maybe I should stop by and help her with some vendor calls. "I've got a lighter schedule this week." I thought it was sweet of him to help. I didn't know he was offering to spend more time with his lover. A week later, my fiancé's behavior shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. After 3 years of being inseparable, he became distant and evasive. It started on a Tuesday when I arrived with Thai takeout. Using my key, I entered his apartment and found him in his bedroom, talking quietly on the phone. When he came out, he looked surprised. "How long have you been here?" "About 20 minutes. I brought dinner," I said, pointing to the food. "Oh, I'm not really hungry. Think I'm coming down with something." He did look flushed, but not sick, just uneasy. When I reached to feel his forehead, he stepped back. "I don't want to get you sick. Maybe go home tonight." In all our years together, he had never sent me home when ill. He usually wanted me to stay. I offered tea or medicine, but he insisted he needed rest. As I gathered my things, I noticed a wine glass on the counter with burgundy lipstick stains, a shade I never wore. "Must be from the cleaning lady," he said, but his cleaner was an older woman who didn't wear makeup or drink on the job. The next night, he didn't answer my call until an hour later. "Sorry, I was at the gym," he said. "Which one?" I asked. "Yours closes early on Wednesdays." He paused. "Tried that new one downtown." But I knew that gym had closed 3 months ago. Friday, I surprised him at work with coffee and pastries. His assistant said he'd left early for a personal appointment. When I called, he claimed, "Just running an errand for my mom." But his mother lived in Florida. When I suggested dinner, he declined, saying he was uptown, though I later saw his car parked at home. The worst came that Saturday. I brought bagels and the paper to his apartment. It was silent inside. I knocked on his bedroom door and heard movement. When he opened it, wearing only a towel, he blocked my view. "I just got out of the shower," he said quickly. "Can I come in?" I asked. "Actually, I'm really sick again. Maybe you should go." For the first time, he refused to let me into his bedroom. When I tried stepping inside, he physically stopped me. "I don't want you catching this." I left, confused and hurt. Nothing about his behavior made sense anymore. 2 days before the wedding, I went to my mother's to collect documents: our marriage license, rings, and a family Bible. She wasn't home, but I had a key. As I opened the safe in her room, I noticed a leather journal on her nightstand. It looked new and expensive, the kind you'd gift someone special. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity won. The first entry was dated 3 months earlier, the same time the strange behavior began. March 15th. "He brought me white tulips today, my favorite. We talked for hours about life and dreams. I feel like I've awakened after years of sleepwalking." My blood ran cold. The flowers, the timing, it all pointed to one person. I turned the page. March 22nd. The guilt is unbearable, but I can't stop thinking about him. When he kissed me, I felt alive again. He says what he has with Rebecca is comfortable, but not passionate. I should end it, but I'm too selfish. The truth hit me. I was reading my mother's affair diary, and her lover was my fiancé. I read on in disbelief. April 5th. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." But instead, I chose something colder, more deliberate. They had plotted this with precision. They deserved the same in return. That night, I made copies of the most revealing pages and stored them safely. Then I called the photographer, asking to add a surprise slideshow to the reception, one with family photos and messages. Mixed in, I included images of those journal pages, subtle, but enough for everyone to see the truth. Later, I called my father to meet me at the hotel. When he arrived, I showed him the journal. Watching him read was heartbreaking, confusion turning to pain. "How long have you known?" he asked softly. "Since yesterday," I replied. After a long silence, he asked, "What do you want to do?" "I want them exposed, publicly, in front of everyone." My father, a man of faith and forgiveness, nodded slowly. "They made their choices. They'll live with the consequences." We spent the night planning. He would conduct the ceremony as usual until the vows. Then I would address the guests. "Are you sure?" he asked before leaving. "Once you do this, there's no going back." "They made that choice for me," I said. "I'm just refusing to be their victim." That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow, I would tell the truth, not quietly, but in front of everyone who thought they knew us. The next morning, I woke with calm determination. No nerves, no doubts, just clarity. I ate breakfast, reviewed my 3-minute speech, and waited for my bridesmaids to arrive, ready to face the day that was supposed to be my wedding, but would instead become my reckoning. I styled my hair into the intricate updo my mother had insisted on. "You look stunning," said my maid of honor, as she clasped my grandmother's pearl necklace around my neck. "I've never seen you so calm before something this big." She was right. I felt completely at peace about what was coming. The photographer arrived at 10 to capture the pre-ceremony moments. I posed for the usual shots, slipping on my shoes, holding my bouquet, gazing out the window thoughtfully. They were meant to show a bride's joy and anticipation. But in truth, they were capturing my quiet preparation for battle. At 11:30, my father came to escort me to the cathedral. When he saw me fully dressed, his composure wavered. "You don't have to do this," he said softly, holding my hands. "We can call it off now. Tell them you're ill or changed your mind. No one will judge you." "I need to do this," I answered, fixing his tie with steady hands. "They planned their betrayal. I get to plan my response." He nodded, realizing this was about more than a broken engagement. It was about reclaiming my dignity and refusing to be the victim in someone else's story. In the limousine, I tucked the copied journal pages inside my bouquet, securing them with a ribbon between the roses. My something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and something true. The cathedral was exactly how my mother had imagined. White lilies everywhere, candles glowing softly along the aisle, classical music filling the vast space. 200 guests sat in the pews, chatting excitedly about the beautiful ceremony ahead. I stood in the vestibule, peeking through the slightly open doors as my mother took her seat in the front row. She wore the navy blue dress we'd chosen together, dapping her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of a proud, emotional mother. Her performance was flawless. My fiancé stood at the altar in his tailored tuxedo, nervously adjusting his cufflinks. From afar, he looked like every woman's dream, handsome, successful, respectable. The guests likely assumed his nerves came from the gravity of marriage. They didn't know he'd already made his true commitment to someone else. "5 minutes," whispered the wedding coordinator, an efficient woman in a black suit who had managed dozens of ceremonies here. "Are you ready?" I looked at myself in the full-length mirror one last time. The reflection staring back was calm and composed. My makeup perfect, my gown flawless, my hair exactly as planned. I looked like a woman about to live her dream, when in truth, I was about to rewrite it. "I'm ready," I told the coordinator. My father appeared beside me, offering his arm. His expression was solemn but resolute. He was fully prepared to stand by me. "Last chance to change your mind," he murmured as the music swelled. "I've never been more certain," I said. The doors opened wide. Every head turned. 200 faces, glowing with anticipation, ready to celebrate what they believed was a love story. My mother played her role, dabbing her eyes again. My fiancé smiled, that same smile that once made me believe in forever. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the hidden journal pages, the proof of everything. The music filled the cathedral as guests smiled and waved, some crying, others taking photos, completely unaware that this was not a wedding, but a reckoning. Not a union, but an unveiling. Not a beginning, but an end. When I reached the altar, I met his eyes. He looked at me with what seemed to be real affection, perhaps convincing himself that marrying me while continuing his affair with my mother was love, not cruelty. In 30 seconds, that illusion would collapse. He leaned toward me, whispering, "You look beautiful." His voice carried warmth, as if nothing were wrong. My father began the ceremony, calm and dignified. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." His voice gave no hint of what was coming. The guests smiled, oblivious. My mother looked proud, his family pleased. As my father spoke about the sanctity of marriage and honesty between spouses, his eyes flickered toward mine. It was time. "Before we proceed with the vows," he said, his tone deepening, "Rebecca has something she'd like to share." A murmur spread through the crowd. This wasn't traditional. Guests leaned forward, curious. I turned toward them, bouquet steady in hand. 200 expectant faces looked back. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice echoing clearly. "I know many of you traveled far to celebrate what you believed would be the happiest day of my life." I paused. A few exchanged uneasy glances. Unfortunately, 2 days ago, I discovered something that changes everything. I reached into my bouquet, pulled out the journal pages, and unfolded them. My mother has been keeping a detailed record of her 3-month affair with my fiancé. Silence fell, complete and suffocating. My fiancé's face turned white, then red, then white again. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" he hissed. I ignored him. "March," I read aloud. "He brought me flowers today. White tulips, my favorite. We talked for hours about life, literature, dreams we've never shared." My mother half rose from her seat, horror frozen on her face. "Rebecca, stop." "April 5th, I continued, louder now. "We made love in my bed while Rebecca was at work and her father was at the church." Afterward, he said he wished things were different, that he wished he'd met me first. Gasps rippled through the cathedral. Guests turned toward my mother and fiancé, stunned and disgusted. "You're making a mistake," he whispered fiercely, gripping my arm. I pulled away. "June 20th, I read. "Tomorrow is the wedding." We both cried afterward. He said after a respectable honeymoon period, we'd find a way to be together again. I feel like I'm attending my daughter's funeral instead of her wedding. The cathedral erupted. Voices, shouting, phones recording. My fiancé's mother screamed, "This can't be true!" My mother collapsed, sobbing. "They plan to continue their affair after our marriage," I said firmly. "This journal, her handwriting, documents everything." I placed the pages on the altar and looked at him directly. "Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I was too naive, too trusting, too weak to act?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked like a man watching his life implode. I turned back to the crowd. The chaos faded into silence. "I could have handled this privately," I said clearly. "I could have spared them the shame. But they chose deception. They chose to write down their betrayal. so I chose truth. Everyone here deserves to know they were celebrating a lie. My mother's voice broke through the silence. "Rebecca, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You betrayed your daughter and everything you stood for. And you," I said to him, "betrayed every promise you ever made. But most importantly, I now understand I deserve better than both of you." I turned to my father. "Thank you for standing with me." His eyes shone with pride and sorrow. Then I walked down the aisle, head high. Guests stared, whispered, filmed. Some reached out in sympathy. Most just watched, stunned. Behind me he called, "Rebecca, wait! I made a mistake!" "But I love you." I didn't stop. "You don't love me," I said without turning. "You love the idea of having us both. That choice was never yours." The cathedral filled with noise again. Shouting, crying, chaos. My mother's sobs echoed off the stone walls. His family yelled, his reputation crumbling in real time. Outside, the sunlight hit me like freedom. The air was fresh, the sky impossibly clear. My best friend rushed toward me. "Rebecca, are you okay? Where will you go?" "I'll be fine." I, truly meaning it. Better than fine. Within hours, the story was everywhere. The video spread across social media. My mother's image as the perfect pastor's wife shattered overnight. His law firm received calls questioning his integrity. Their affair became a public scandal neither could escape. That day, which was meant to begin my perfect life, instead marked the moment I chose myself. I realized sometimes love means refusing to be destroyed by others' selfishness. 6 months later, I was living in a bright apartment in Portland, Oregon, 2,000 miles from my old life. I'd become a senior editor at a respected publishing house specializing in women's fiction about resilience and transformation. My life was simple but peaceful. I worked with writers who created complex heroines making hard choices. I lived alone for the first time since college and loved it. My apartment, filled with sunlight, books, and choices entirely my own, reflected who I truly was. The first few months were hard. My name and story followed me online, making dating and interviews awkward. But time passed. People forgot. I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. My father visited twice, healthier and more at peace than I'd ever seen him. He'd filed for divorce a week after the wedding, citing betrayal and broken vows. It was finalized 4 months later. He was now seeing a kind widow from his church, someone who valued his honesty. "I should thank you," he told me once over coffee. "You gave me permission to admit my marriage was making me miserable." I finally realized I deserve happiness too. My mother reached out 3 times. First, a long letter full of excuses and guilt. I threw it away. Then a voicemail sobbing and pleading. I deleted it. Finally, a package with family photos and jewelry. I donated the jewelry and kept only one picture, me and my father at graduation, smiling freely. My ex tried harder, endless texts, calls, messages through friends, always the same cycle: apology, justification, anger, then desperation. His final email begged for another chance, claiming therapy and regret. I read it once, then blocked him. He didn't deserve forgiveness. He deserved to be forgotten. The biggest surprise was how little I missed either of them. I'd expected grief or loneliness, but instead, I felt peace. The constant anxiety, wondering if I was enough, was gone. I no longer had to perform. I could just be Rebecca. 1 year later, I stood before 300 women at the Portland Convention Center, giving a talk titled, "Choosing Truth Over Comfort: Why Self-Respect is Never Selfish." I thought my life was perfect, I told them. I had a great career, a wedding planned, and a loving family, or so I believed. But my fiancé was having an affair with my mother. The room was silent. When I discovered their betrayal, I had two choices: protect their image or stand for truth. I chose honesty. Painful, public, freeing honesty. For 45 minutes, I spoke about courage, boundaries, and the power of self-respect. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Women lined up to share their own stories of choosing truth. That night, I returned home to my apartment, to the life I'd built from the ground up. I had books I loved, plants I'd chosen, and peace I'd earned. I was dating again, slowly, carefully, with clear standards. The man I was seeing, a literature professor, respected my independence completely. My career flourished. I'd been promoted twice and was planning to start my own literary consulting business. I was also writing a book, not a memoir of pain, but a guide for women reclaiming their strength. My bond with my father had deepened. He'd remarried the kind widow, and their happiness reminded me that real love doesn't hurt. He often told me how proud he was of my courage. As for my mother and ex, their affair lasted just 3 weeks after the wedding. Reality broke them. My mother moved to Florida, running from her shame. My ex left his job and city, unable to rebuild his reputation. They'd both lost everything, chasing what never should have existed. And I felt neither pity nor satisfaction, only freedom. Because my revenge was never about ruining them. It was about refusing to let them ruin me. My revenge was this: a peaceful, authentic life. The realization that I was stronger, wiser, and more capable than I ever knew. The woman who once stood at that altar broken had transformed into someone who would never again accept less than she deserved. And that transformation, that truth, was worth more than any love built on lies could ever be.